This is aimed at leaders who want to understand how to lead people better. I'm recently retired from Nationwide, where I was the Group General Counsel. I was there for 7 or 8 years. Before that, I was at Barclays and spent about 8 years there as well, and covered, the easiest way of describing it, I was the Global General Counsel for everything that wasn't the investment bank. Prior to that, I was actually on the wholesale side of financial services. I was at Nomura, at the time the biggest bank in the world, Japanese bank, and I was the European General Counsel there. Prior to that, I was at Freshfields, qualified there in 1993, and had a couple of secondments. I spent a year in New York with Simpson Thacher when Freshfields was looking to merge with an American firm, and then moved from there to spend a year in the Office of Legal Affairs at the United Nations. And came home, decided I wanted to move in-house. The UN experience opened my eyes to that, and that was when I made the switch to Nomura. Everything revolves around interpersonal relationships. You know, whether you're giving advice or receiving advice, you've got to trust the person who's giving that advice, otherwise you won't want to follow it. And so actually developing that rapport and understanding how to speak to someone, persuade someone, encourage someone to give you more information is absolutely at the heart of what any lawyer does, not just an in-house lawyer. And what I found the mediation skills course did was just open my eyes to a different level of looking to secure that level of trust. And you have to do it at speed in a mediation setting, which again is very equivalent to an in-house legal role. And so I found it fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I have to say, as a party, I wish I'd done the mediation course earlier, because I would have had a lot more respect for how skillful the mediator was being, but also I would have been more attuned to the way in which they were trying to elicit, encourage, cajole, ultimately drive towards a potential settlement. And being able to pick up on those signals, I think as a party would have been really helpful actually. I mean, the role of the General Counsel is quite a complicated one. Everyone thinks it's just legal advisor to the company. It's a lot more than that. You're a leader. You'll have a team of people that you are leading. In my case, the biggest team I led was 375 people. And you can guarantee when you are leading a decent sized team that there are going to be interpersonal issues, and ultimately you end up mediating between those. The stakeholder management point is absolutely bang on. You've got an exco, you've got a CEO, a CFO, a COO, a board, a chief risk officer, and everyone has their own agenda, everyone has a little bit of internal politics, and so managing through that, while as a general counsel I've always thought it's very important to remain agenda free. You want to be the one person around the table who isn't seen as having an agenda. And so figuring out how to do that and develop those interpersonal skills while still retaining that agenda free persona is one of the big challenges I think a general counsel faces. And then also you want to be externally networked. And so the ability to go out, meet new people, and basically use those networks to bring intelligence back to the advantage of the organisation of which you are the General Counsel. They're all important facets, and they all involve those interpersonal, how do I elicit information, how do I build rapport, how do I engage? And the course was superb for that. In teams, I often try and establish an individual as a conscientious contrarian who will not go along with the herd and who will challenge pretty much every idea that gets thrown out onto the table, because it's a good way of kicking an idea around. Separate point, I also think having diversity, not only diversity of background but of thought, skills, hugely important. But looking at things that I would do differently, I think one of the skills that I found most hard during the course was, as a lawyer, by background that is me, you spend your entire life being taught to ask quite closed questions. And the skill that I found quite difficult to navigate was moving to a far more open style of questions, particularly during the early phases of a mediation, but then oscillating very intentionally between the two, and knowing why you're doing it in order to try and either drive a particular outcome or encourage more information flow or whatever, but consciously thinking about how you change your questioning style with a view to an achieved outcome is something that I've definitely drawn from the course, that I will use, not if I get the chance to be a mediator, not just in mediation, but in so many other walks of life. Most people will have a natural style. It's part of who you are as to how you engage, how you negotiate, how you deal with other people. But recognising, and it's almost like a Myers-Briggs thing. I remember I had a CEO at Barclays, and whenever a new boss came in that he had to deal with, the first thing he did was figure out their Myers-Briggs type. And he would then adjust the way in which he presented information so that he was presenting it in a way that their Myers-Briggs type would receive it well. And I think what I learned is that there is a real value in flexing your style by picking up on messages that you get back from the mediating party and then adjusting your style to most encourage them to give, to engage, to feel comfortable. And I hadn't thought of it in that way before. I'd only thought of it in a commercial negotiation context when you are looking to get something, but actually just in that way of softly adjusting your style, the way you phrase information questions, I found that really interesting. Any table, whether it be an exco or a board, or even your own leadership team, there are going to be interpersonal dynamics between there, and that's just at a very human level. You've then got characters who will have agendas driven by what they are trying to achieve through their business. Will it be, I want more budget, or I need more headcount, or I don't want to have to cut headcount. And so you've always got a table that has dynamics and agendas. And the best advice that I ever got as a general counsel was that I need you to be the one person around the table who does not operate with an agenda, and to whom I, as the CEO or whomever, I can turn and know that I'll get an answer that is in the genuine best interest of the organisation. And so knowing that that is how you have to sit, but recognising the dynamics and the agendas around the table makes it quite an interpersonal minefield. And so you just have to recognise that, but forge good relationships, again using techniques in terms of how you might flex your style, when you have a conversation, when you hold back, recognising how different people like to receive information. Some will want it written form, some will want to have a conversation. And it's just working all of those. It's like spinning plates. But it's one of the best parts of the job, in my view, because you do get to have that agenda-free existence while moving around people, trying to build ultimately trust. If you aren't a trusted advisor as a GC, what are you doing? Look, the world doesn't stop. So tech continues to evolve. There is always, I've never been in an organisation where there isn't pressure on headcount and cost, so you've got to constantly be delivering things more effectively, more efficiently. But equally, I think just the financial crisis, I think, did elevate the role of the General Counsel, because you were confronted with boards and excos taking decisions that could really come back and bite them as individuals, as an executive body and as a board. And so the voice of the General Counsel, I think, became far more resonant during that crisis. And I don't think that resonance has gone away. And I think what it also brought was a need to bring much more leadership to the fore. Because often you would sit in a board and you would expect to be, you would speak when spoken to. Now the expectation is you speak up. I don't think people necessarily, until they step inside the role, understand what it is. Yeah. And I think that's one of the problems, because there isn't really someone out there saying to people, before you get this job, do you really want it? Because this is what it involves. And I think that would have been a fantastic conversation for me to have had at the right point in time in my career. Now, as it happens, I think it's the best job in the world. And I feel absolutely blessed to have been able to do it at different organisations. But you go in not really understanding what you're climbing inside. I think I was on an arc. Yeah. When you first start, I don't think anybody was enjoying it, to be honest, because you are lifted out of your comfort zone in a major way. And there are two elements, I would say. There is the role playing as the mediator, but then the role playing as the parties. And it was really interesting, the group I was training with, we had a conversation on about day 2 or day 3 around whether it would have been better for CEDR to use actors in the role playing of the parties. And I think our initial view was yes, because you have to spend a lot of time reading the briefs to perform those role playing roles well. But in hindsight, I moved away from that. I think everybody else did, because you got the chance in those role playing aspects as a party to watch how someone else was playing the role of the mediator. And you could pick up bits that you would do, pick up bits that you would say, oh, I'd have done that a bit differently. But it was a brilliant way of being on the receiving end of what a mediator would do well and you know, how you would do it differently. And therefore, I think much as there was a lot of hard work involved in actually doing the role playing as the parties, because candidly, if the role playing of the parties isn't done well, the mediator has a hellish difficult time. And so it was a really interesting exercise, but ultimately you've got to learn by doing. Yeah. And if you're going to do as a mediator, you know, for goodness sake, spend some time doing it as a role play before you unleash yourself on the unsuspecting world. This is not a course that should be aimed at lawyers. This is aimed at leaders who want to understand how to lead people better, because if you are leading a team, there will be times where you will have to, whether you know you're doing it or not, mediate between members of your team. And then if people go on to want to actually become mediators, you don't go to mediation to get legal advice. And you know, one of the things that always slightly frustrated me was when I was often looking for mediators, I would find a lot of ex-barristers, ex-judges, and they will look at things, unless well trained, through a very black letter law lens. And that's not why you go to mediation. You go to mediation to avoid all the black letter law and to see if there is a straightforward, simple, practical, workable solution that can be found that will last. And I don't think there's any need for legal skills in that. And I think CPOs, you know, anyone in an industry where you can see disputes arising, you know, if you can actually have an initial go at mediating the thing before you actually go to formal mediation through the skills you acquired through the course, then you save yourself a bucket load. It's consciously understanding the different techniques and skills that the mediation course has given you and figuring out when is the right time to deploy them. Simple example, you know, on the day the course finished, I was on a flight back to South Africa, and I went back where I was volunteering in a school of which I'm a trustee in an informal settlement in South Africa. And 2 days back, I found myself using mediation techniques to resolve an issue between two school children. Wow. And I suddenly realized I was doing something that I'd picked up from the course. And it was like a light bulb moment. And it was actually brilliant, because not only did I realize I was doing it without necessarily thinking about it, but I solved the problem. I think there is an opportunity within law firms to potentially mediate between partners where disputes arise. And that was my original goal behind doing the course, to get myself accredited to offer that as a service through the consultancy. But I have to say, having done the course, I'm really genuinely interested in actually looking to expand the mediation more broadly. Particularly, I'd love to get into the commercial mediation side with a background in both wholesale and retail financial services, and my in-house experience. I've been in-house since 2000. The last 18 of those as a general counsel. I used to struggle to find senior in-house mediators, people with that background. And so I'm really hopeful that I can develop some form of a practice using those skills, that background.